Old, white-bearded, and ragged, my host possessed a countenance and physique which inspired equal wonder and respect. His height could not have been less than 6 feet, and despite a general air of age and poverty, he was stout and powerful in proportion. His face, almost hidden by a long beard which grew high on the cheeks, seemed abnormally ruddy and less wrinkled than one might expect, while over a high forehead fell a shock of white hair little thinned by the years. His blue eyes, though a trifle bloodshot, seemed inexplicably keen and burning. But for his horrible unkemptness, the man would have been as distinguished-looking as he was impressive. This unkemptness, however, made him offensive despite his face and figure. Of what his clothes consisted I could hardly tell, for it seemed to me no more than a mass of tatters surmounting a pair of high, heavy boots, and his lack of cleanliness surpassed description. The appearance of this man and the instinctive fear he inspired prepared me for something like enmity, so that I almost shuddered through surprise and a sense of uncanny incongruity when he motioned me to a chair and addressed me in a thin, weak voice full of fawning respect and ingratiating hospitality. His speech was very curious, an extreme form of Yankee dialect I had thought long extinct, and I studied it closely as he sat down opposite me for conversation. "Ketched you in the rain, didn't ye?" he greeted. "Glad you was nigh the house and had the sense to come right in. I calculate I was asleep, else I heard you. As young as I used to be, and I need a powerful sight of nap nowadays. Travelin' for? I hadn't seen many folks along this road since they took off the Arkham stage." I replied that I was going to Arkham and apologized for my rude entry into his domicile, whereupon he continued. "Glad to see you, young sir. New faces is scarce around here, and I ain't got much to cheer me up these days. Guess you hail from Boston, don't you?" "I've been there, but I can tell a town man when I see him. We had run for deer stick schoolmaster in '84, but he quite stunted, and ain't no one's heard from him since." Here the old man lapsed into a kind of chuckle and made no explanation when I questioned him. He seemed to be in an aboundingly good humor, yet to possess these eccentricities which one might have guessed from his grooming. For some time he rambled on with almost a feverish generality, when it struck me to ask him how he came by so rare a book as Pickford's Regnum Congo. The effect of this volume had not left me, and I felt a certain hesitancy in speaking of it, but curiosity overmastered all the vague fears which had steadily accumulated since my first glimpse of the house. To my relief, the question did not seem an awkward one, for the old man answered freely and volubly. "Oh, that Afriky book? Captain Ebenezer Holt traded me that in '68. Him as was killed in the war." Something about the name of Ebenezer Holt caused me to look up sharply. I had encountered it in my genealogical work, but not in any record since the Revolution. I wondered if my host could help me in the task at which I was laboring, and resolved to ask him about it later. He continued. "Ebenezer was an honest sailing merchant for years. Picked up a sight of queer stuff at every port. Got this in London, I guess. Used to like to buy things at the shops. I was up at his house once, in the hill trading hosses, when I sees this book. I relished the pictures, so he gave it on a swap. 'Tis a queer book. Here, let me get my spectacles." The old man fumbled among his rags, producing a pair of dirty and amazingly antique glasses, with small octagonal lenses and steel bows. Donning these, he reached for the volume on the table and turned the pages lovingly. "Ebenezer could read a little at this Latin. I can't. I had 2 or 3 schoolmasters read me a bit, and Parson Clark, him they say got drowned in the pond. Can you make anything out of it?" I told him that I could, and translated for his benefit a paragraph near the beginning. If I erred, he was not scholar enough to correct me, for he seemed childishly pleased at my English version. His proximity was becoming rather obnoxious, yet I saw no way to escape without offending him. I was amused at the childish fondness of this ignorant old man for the pictures in the book he could not read, and wondered how much better he could read the few books in English which adorned the room. This revelation of simplicity removed such an ill-defined apprehension I had felt, and I smiled as my host rambled on. "Queer how pictures can set a body thinking. Take this in here near the front. You ever see trees like that with big leaves a-flopping over down? And them men. Can't be Negroes, they do beat all.
Kinda like Injuns, I guess, even if they be African. Some of these here critters look like monkeys and half men, but I never heard of nothing like this'n.
Here he pointed to a fabulous creature of the artist, which one might describe as a sort of dragon with the head of an alligator.
But now I'll show you the best one, over here in the middle.
The old man's speech grew a trifle thicker, and his eyes assumed a brighter glow, but his fumbling hands, though seemingly clumsier than before, were entirely adequate to their mission. The book fell open almost of its own accord, and, as if from frequent consultation at this place, to the repellent 12th plate showing a butcher's shop amongst the Anzi cannibals. My sense of restlessness returned, though I did not exhibit it. The especially bizarre thing was that the artist had made his Africans look like white men. The limbs and quarters hanging about the walls of the shop were ghastly, while the butcher with his axe was hideously incongruous. But my host seemed to relish the view as much as I disliked it.
What do you think of this? And ain't never seen the likes hereabout, eh? When I see this, I tell, behold, that's something to stir you up and make your blood tickle. When I read in the scripture about slaying, like them Midianites and slew kind of things, but I ain't got no picture of it. Here a body can see all there is to it. I suppose 'tis sinful, but ain't we all born and living in sin? That feller being chopping up gives me a tickle every time I look at him. I hate to keep looking at him. See where the butcher cut off his feet. There's his head on that bench with one arm side of it. Another arm's on the other side of the block.
As the man mumbled on in his shocking ecstasy, the expression on his hairy, spectacled face became indescribable, but his voice sank rather than mounted. My own sensations can scarcely be recorded. All the terror I had dimly felt before rushed upon me actively and vividly, and I knew that I loathed the ancient and abhorrent creature so near me with an infinite intensity. His madness, or at least his partial perversion, seemed beyond dispute. He was almost whispering now, with a huskiness more terrible than a scream, and I trembled as I listened.
As I says, 'tis queer how pictures set you thinking. You know, young sir, right side on this in here. Arter I got the book off Ev, I used to look at it a lot, especially when I heard Pastor Clark ran on Sundays in his big wig. Once I tried something funny. Here, young sir, don't get scared. All I done was to look at the pictures before I killed the sheep for market. Killing sheep was kind of fun after looking at it.
The tone of the old man now sank very low, sometimes becoming so faint that his words were hardly audible. I listened to the rain and to the rattling of the bleared, small-pane windows, and marked a rumbling of approaching thunder quite unusual for the season. Once a terrific flash and peal shook the frail house to its foundations, and the whisper seemed not to notice it.
Killing sheep was kind of more fun, but, twa'n't quite satisfying. Queer how craving gets a hold on you. As you love the Almighty, young man, don't tell nobody, but I swear that picture begun to make me hungry for victuals. I couldn't raise nor buy. Here, sit still, what's ailing you? I didn't do nothing, only I wondered how it would be if I did. You say, meat makes blood and flesh, and gives new life, so I wondered if 'twouldn't make a man live longer, and longer, if 'twas more the same.
But the whisper never continued. The interruption was not produced by my fright, nor by the rapidly increasing storm amidst whose fury I was presently to open my eyes on a smoky solitude of blackened ruins. It was produced by a very simple, though somewhat unusual, happening. The book lay flat between us, with the picture staring repulsively upward. As the old man whispered the words, "more the same," a tiny splattering impact was heard, and something showed on the yellow paper of the upturned volume. I thought of the rain and of a leaky roof, but rain is not red. On the butcher's shop of the Anzi cannibals, a small red splattering glistened picturesquely, lending vividness to the horror of the engraving. The old man saw it and stopped whispering even before my expression of horror made it necessary. Saw it and glanced quickly toward the floor of the room he had left an hour before. I followed his glance and beheld just above us on the loose plaster of the ancient ceiling a large irregular spot of wet crimson, which seemed to spread even as I viewed it. I did not shriek or move, but merely shut my eyes. A moment later came the titanic thunderbolt of thunderbolts, blasting that accursed house of unutterable secrets and bringing the oblivion which alone saved my mind.